Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As introduced, Nigel Robinson, CEO of Central Asia Metals. Thanks for the time to introduce our business to you all. Quick disclaimer there, and then into the business, really. Where do we operate? We operate in Kazakhstan, ninth largest country in the world, landlocked country. It's got a population only of about 18 million people and GDP around $8,600 per head. We have two projects there. The main project really is the Kounrad project, which I'll touch on later. That's an SXEW copper production facility. We produce around about 13,000 to 14,000 tons of pure cathode copper from that operation. It's got a life of mine beyond 2030, licenses to 2034, and last year we produced 14,103 tons of copper. We also have an exploration asset in the north of the country, just north of Astana, called Shuak, which I'll touch on. That's a bit of upside for the business. Late last year, we acquired a business in Macedonia, the Sasa underground mine. That's lead and zinc concentrates. Macedonia, very different to Kazakhstan in many ways. It is landlocked, like Kazakhstan, but it's a far smaller country and a far smaller population with a GDP per head of about $6,000 per ton. Some people have said, why don't we change the name now? But I think now that we're operating in Macedonia, we've probably got 26 years to make a decision on that particular one. Company timeline, just to give people an understanding, we're not new on the block at all. The company incorporated in 2005. In 2010, we did an AIM listing and raised $60 million. Primarily, most of those funds were to actually construct the SXEW facility at Kazakhstan. And we raised money at 96 pence, as you can see here. From that point onwards, through to about 2015, we spent most of the time developing the project, so building the initial plant, which cost us $39 million of the $60 million we'd raised. And initially, it was only a 10,000 ton per annum cathode copper facility. But over the following years, up to about 2015, we added extra SX tanks and electro winning capability to that, to make it effectively a 15,000 ton per annum cathode copper plant. But we're comfortable with producing around about between 13 and 14,000 tons. And you'll probably understand that a little bit more when I tell you what the actual process is that we have at Camel over at Kounrad. And in 2012, we started a share buyback program on the basis that the shares didn't seem to be performing as well as we thought they should. And in December of 2012, we instigated a dividend policy, which we followed ever since, to the point whereby at the end of 2017 last year, we'd paid back $129 million to shareholders, 77 pence per share of 96 pence being raised in 2010. And late last year as well, a couple of things happened last year. First, we had the commencement of leaching on the western dumps, and that'll become, you'll appreciate what I mean by that in a minute when I talk about Kounrad. And at the end of the year, we did a reverse takeover of the Sasa mine in Macedonia for $402.5 million. That was a transformational transaction for the company, effectively. Just a little bit on our shares and our share price performance since we listed. And you can see the blue line here is our share price performance, steadily increasing against actually a backdrop of declining copper prices most of the time. Obviously, that's turned the corner a little bit, and you've had various presentations through the past couple of days about how bullish people seem to be on the copper price. And there's our share price against the FTSE AIM All-Share Index. A couple of statistics on the shares. We've got 176 million shares out. We've got a market capitalisation at the moment of about £450 million on yesterday's share price, and a free float of around about 96%. And you can see some of our shareholdings, which is something we're very proud of, actually. Institutions, a good shareholder base there, Fidelity, Hargreave Hale, J.O. Hambro, BlackRock, Majidi, AXA, so all the city institutions a lot of you will know. Orion there are the people that we actually bought the Sasa mine from. They took $50 million in shares as part of the transaction for the $402.5 million. So what's Kounrad? Just an overview of the Kounrad asset. Effectively, it's an old Soviet pit here that was operated by Kazakh Mis. It's been operated since 1936. That hole in the ground that you can see there is about 500 meters deep and 2 kilometers north to south and about 1.5 kilometers east to west. And what we actually do is we process these old dumps around here. They're not tailings. but the old waste ore that came out of the pit that wasn't processed, either due to the technology wasn't there in the early days, or the fact that the grade itself wasn't sufficient to make it commercially viable. We have the eastern dumps here and the western dumps here. Started the operation here by building the plant, SXEW plant, and leaching in situ. We don't move any of the ore, we leach in situ, hence why we're low cost. Started in the eastern dumps, and as part of the expansion, we not only increased the plant size from 10,000 to 15,000 tonnes per annum, we also built two 12-kilometre pipelines from east to west effectively, which will be such that when we leach in the western dumps, we effectively ship what we call the pregnant leach solution, which contains the copper, over to the plant for processing. And then we take it down to Balkhash and onto the railway networks for shipping out to Turkey to copper wire manufacturers. As I say, we started in the eastern dumps. That contains around about 160,000 tonnes of contained copper. We recover in the east about 50% of that copper. So our estimates were to be recovering about 80,000 tonnes from the east. And to date, we've done 63,000 tonnes. That's obviously a very accurate number. It's probably different today. We've got about 15,000 tonnes of copper left to actually access in the eastern dumps. And hence the reason why we expanded the infrastructure such that we could leach in the western side of the area. Where we're currently operating is in this area here called the ILA, the initial leaching area. There's about 36,000 tonnes of recoverable copper in that area alone. And to date, we've done about 6,000 tonnes of that. We only started leaching in the west April of last year. It is slightly different mineralogy, as you can see here. We get better recoveries in the east from the west, the higher dumps. But all our test work indicated, that we would leach within a 20-month cycle, and that's what's actually happened over the past year that we've been leaching in the west. The leaching has performed very much in line with our plans and gives us confidence that this has got a 20-year life now through to 2034 in terms of the license area. As you can see, 167,000 tonnes of recoverable copper remaining in these other parts outside the initial leach area. Production and costs, as you can see, it is fairly seasonal. It gets very cold winters in Kazakhstan, down to minus 30 degrees. So we do produce more in the summer months in Q2 and Q3. But throughout our time since we started leaching and started producing copper, we see marginal improvements each year in each of the quarters. And also incremental changes from the 10,000 tonne plant to the 15,000 tonne plant. The key to our success in many ways is the low cash cost of operation. We're down at 52 cents per pound, as you can see here, and copper's currently selling around $3 per pound or $3.10. And we've been down in that area ever since we started production. And you can see on the cost curve where we sit, certainly in the lowest quartile at 52 cents per pound. And even when we take a copper equivalent with Sasa as well as Kounrad at 76 cents per pound, we're still down in the lowest quartile with both operations. Moving on to the Sasa mine, the reserves, we've currently got 10.9. Sorry, apologies for that. The Sasa mine here, we've got 10.9 million of reserves. It's about a 14-year life of mine, effectively, in terms of just those reserves alone. If we take the resources, and SRK, when we did the due diligence on the mine, estimated that at a 50% conversion ratio, the inferred resources here, 2.7 and 7.4 in the other parts of the ore body, convert those at 50%, that gives you another 6 years of life, which is about a 20-year life of mine. The ore body itself is a zinc-lead skarn deposit. It dips at approximately 35 degrees. It's about a 1 kilometre down strike and 700 metres depth. And the mining method that we currently use, and we're reviewing that at the moment, is sub-level caving. They've done that historically there. We've continued to do that. But with the new chief operating officer that we brought on board in April of this year, we're actually looking at a life of mine plan to review whether that's the optimum way of mining at the moment. And the other key point here is the capital development to all the main levels within the mine has already been spent effectively. We have access down to most of the faces. We have declines, we have a shaft, and a lot of the ore is actually moved through the shaft and those declines. That's all in place. So it wasn't just a low operating cost that attracted us, it's the low capex of the mine moving forward as well. Just a little bit on historical production. Just bear in mind that last year, our attributable production was only 2 months worth. We only finished the completion of the transaction in early November of last year. But in terms of what it actually produced last year as a mine, around about 793,000 tonnes of ore. The combined grade of the lead and the zinc is about 7%, and the lead last year was 29,881 tonnes, with zinc of 21,500 tonnes. Q1 of this year, and it isn't seasonal like Kounrad is, Q1 of this year we were looking at 5,500 tonnes of zinc we produced and 7,000 tonnes of lead. So if you multiply those both four, you can see that we're well within the range to hit our guidance for this year, which is 21,000 to 23,000 tonnes of zinc and 28,000 to 30,000 tonnes of lead. Once again on costs, low-cost operation, like I said before. Not a lot of people show zinc C1 cash costs, but we've produced that under the guidance of Wood Mackenzie, 44 cents per pound. That's where we sit, just about on the lowest quartile, which in terms of our business model is exactly where we want to be, given that we can't influence the prices of the metals that we sell. And you can see the actual unit cost per run of mine. So for 792,000 tonnes of ore that we processed last year, the unit cost was $34 per tonne, which is very competitive in the industry. Future, well, as I said before, we are looking at a life of mine plan. We've got a new chief operating officer on board. But the main thing is that a lot of the capital development in the ore body here has already been sunk. The cost for those down to the 830 level has already been sunk. And what we're now doing is going further lower levels than that, should I say, down to 750 levels and doing further exploration work. And in terms of the tailings from the mine, we're just completing a tailings dam at a cost of nearly $11 million to be complete in the second half of this year. And that'll give sufficient tailings capacity out to 2026. The diagram of it. CSR, very important to us. Health and safety, environment, looking after the community. We're very proud of our health and safety record at Kounrad, and we're pleased to see at Sasa they had a very good track record as well on health and safety. Likewise on contributions to local community. We've spent $1.5 million since we started Kounrad in the local community. And likewise, there's similar amounts of money spent in the town of Macedonica close to the Sasa mine, which is encouraging. And finally, the environmental aspect obviously is very important to us. We're learning a bit more of it at Sasa, but certainly at Kounrad, we spend a lot of money in terms of boreholes and the hydrogeology of the leaching process that we do in situ to make sure that there's no damage to the environment at all. Some of the upside we've got, as I said before, we've got a project in northern Kazakhstan called Shuak. What we're looking for here is the oxide potential effectively, although there is potentially sulfide potential as well. We spent $1.5 million last year drilling this, did about 22,000 meters of drilling. This year we've got a program, as you can see here, to do about another 24,000 meters of drilling just to prove up that resource. And then Q1 of next year we'll be looking to see whether or not we've found sufficient resource there to actually commercially make it viable. Just a few statistics on it. We're not singing from the rooftops too much about this until we've done a bit more drilling to understand exactly what we have at that particular asset. Bit on summary financials. I say we've been operating since 2012. Since that time, we've increased the production at Kounrad. We're steady state now. We're fully developed and fully invested at Kounrad at about the 14,000 tonnes per annum of copper output. Sasa just coming on board in 2017, copper equivalents of 3,300. And what's interesting here, what you can see throughout that period since we started production is our C1 cash cost, 63, 66. Large drop here in 2016 because of a devaluation in 2015 primarily, but averaging over that period of 58 cents per pound, which is very competitive. You can see the figures for yourself. I suppose that's a key number in terms of how we operate. EBITDA margins on average over that period of 60%. And then dividends back to shareholders. Dividend policy. This has been absolutely key to the business in many ways. Delivering shareholder value. Ever since we started production at Kounrad and we started the dividend policy back in December 2012, as I said before, we've paid back $129 million to shareholders, and our policy was initially quite racy in many ways. It was based on revenue, and we committed to our shareholders we give back a minimum of 20% of the revenue we generated at Kounrad. Historically, we paid 30% of that back to the shareholders. Once we acquired Sasa, I think we felt we've probably got to grow up a little bit from this and become a little bit more mature. So we still wanted to maintain a dividend policy that was based on cash flow. So that's our current dividend policy from the turn of the year, that we will return to our shareholders a target range of between 30 and 50% of the free cash flow, which is defined in our books as net cash generated from operating activities less the capex. Hence the point why I said before, the capex at Sasa being low is important to us. We don't want to eat into all that cash flow on capital and not be able to pay back healthy dividends to the shareholders, because that's become our modus operandi effectively. You can see how the share price performed in many ways since we did the deal. We've come off the boil a little bit at the moment, but we went up to £3.40, should I say, in March of last year. And those are the returns to shareholders. So in summary, I think I'm out of time now. We've got 2 low-cost operations, low capex operations as well. We've got exploration potential at Shuak. We've now got diversification within the group, exposure to 3 different geographical jurisdictions we operate in. We've got an attractive cash flow-based dividend policy, and our integration of the Sasa mine is very much on track. And finally, the guidance for this year that we're giving to the market, and we're on track to meet these, is 13,000 to 14,000 tonnes of cathode copper, 21,000 to 23,000 tonnes of zinc, and 28,000 to 30,000 tonnes of lead. Myself and Louise Rathall there, my investment relations manager, are around. We're in the booths if you've got any questions. But on that note, I'll draw it to a halt. Thanks. Just